So our last delegation will be Rosalinda Klempen. Good morning, Ms. Klempen. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning.
Whenever you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation to us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of very strong rules for the rental renovation license bylaw. My name is Rosalinda, and I'm an ACOIN member. I want to address the report of the Planning and Housing Committee to Councillor Troster and the submission of Tony Miller in the context of my own experience. Cutting to the chase, the needs of the bylaw are about tenant protection from landlord harassment and blatantly fraudulent threats to force tenants, especially long-term tenants, to vacate purely to garner ill-gain profit. I wish to provide evidence that renoviction threats coming both with N11s, cash for keys, and N13s, renovictions are being employed as abusive bad faith leverage for profiteering. Data about these cases is missing. The consequent harm is tenant displacement, suffering, and loss of affordable housing. Having been under this siege for almost 2 years, I can attest to how it consumes your life, causing severe stress, mental anguish, and chronic exhaustion. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Miller's claim that RTA regulations discourage landlords from pursuing renovictions. My landlord, Ann Barra, purchased multiple properties and served all the inherited tenants within 11s, which, as Mr. Miller correctly states, do not constitute evictions, but voluntary agreements to vacate. The eviction threat was in the accompanying letter, boldly stating eviction was inevitable due to a need for renovations. You are all targeted for termination, and an N13 is coming. This helped me explain the despicable landlord harassment I've been experiencing. All tenants were fully aware that any renoviction would be in bad faith. 2 moved out within 11 agreements due to the N13 threat. I agree with Mr. Miller that tenants have access to resources about their rights, but the information given about the RT and LTB is discouraging. One example is the Service Action Housing, stating they do go to the LTB as representation, but don't normally do N13s as there's not a lot of success and they are very difficult to fight. And even if the landlord does not produce a building permit at the hearing, the eviction may be accepted. Contrary to the claim of Mr. Miller, landlords have every reason to be encouraged to pursue renovictions. The tenants of my building who moved out after the N13 threat investigated their rights, and they knew that the future costs and risks of fighting the ruthless assault of the landlord would be absurdly damaging, and a chance of losing at a renoviction hearing leaves insufficient time to move. They did not risk their fundamental survival need for housing to the LTB. From my considerable LTB experience, the landlord could easily be favored, and the LTB provides no significant deterrent consequences to violating landlords and does not even enforce its own fines. Mr. Miller states only official LTB data must be used to count renovictions. I disagree. Data is missing about tenants harassed out of their homes by renoviction threat. The 2 vacated under threat apartments in my building were not subjected to major renovations. An inspector who checked on the need for an asbestos removal N13 claim of the landlord not only found no asbestos after testing, but stated it wouldn't matter since all work done was cosmetic, or as he put it, and I quote, to freshen it up. The remaining tenants in all properties owned by the same landlord were eventually served identical N13 doses with a list of unnecessary renovation work. These and many other harassing N13s need to be tracked and are not accounted for in the LTB data because the landlord did not file them. Mr. Miller reports that about 50% of landlord L2 eviction applications at LTB for renovictions resulted in eviction. So were 50% found to be in bad faith and were more actually in bad faith but granted? Regardless, all tenants would have suffered greatly from the L2 proceedings. Mr. Miller reports about 50% of L2 applications were withdrawn by the landlords before scheduled hearings. I would submit that a combination of successful wrongful possession of the units from the N13 threat notice alone and totally indefensible N13s could explain the withdrawals, and regardless, all tenants would have suffered. The statement of Mr. Miller that most landlords defer repair and renovations until tenants move out naturally could more accurately be amended to naturally or because they were bad faith threatened out. Recent ridiculous increases in the market cost of rent encourage unscrupulous landlords to use bad faith N12s, N13s, and N13 threats to scare tenants out. This trend may explain the huge percentage increases in these notices in the report of the Planning and Housing Committee. We need a strong bylaw, such as Toronto has, not only to prevent fraudulent landlord renovictions, but attempted fraud threat renovictions, because both are serious offenses with horrendous consequences. We need stringent requirements to serve and track all N13s to stop landlords' campaigns of predatory profit seeking. The question is, does the capital city of Canada have the conviction to close the RTA loopholes to stop criminal landlord behavior? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klempen. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much. Just for anyone who's watching, the delegate was referring to some correspondence that councillors received, and that a particular real estate investor has put out publicly questioning the veracity of this data. So I want to thank you for coming here. So just to summarize, you're talking about the issuance of an N13 or the threat of an N13 being used as a threat for tenants and then potentially withdrawn when people feel intimidated to move out. Correct?
What do you mean by potentially withdrawn? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so not, a landlord, for example, could
Oh,
issue eviction notices to an entire building, but if a lot of people move out, that's not going to proceed through the court system. But functionally, the eviction has happened.
This is the missing data. How many N13s are being thrown like mud at the wall to see what sticks?
Yeah.
Also, N11s are not eviction threats in and of themselves, but mine came with an eviction threat.
Okay.
And the tenants who moved out not on the N13, which came later, but on the basis of the eviction threat letter that accompanied the N11.
Right.
Yeah. So threats are threats, right? None of these threats are being accounted for. I think we have an extremely serious problem on our hands, and that we have to deal with it.
So your own building received notices. How many apartments are in the building?
There are 7 total units in the building,
Okay.
but there are only 6 in my building that were actually occupied.
Okay. And were any of them returned to market after folks left? Like,
Oh,
did you
yes.
see the rent differential?
Oh, yes.
So what was the difference between before and after?
Oh, it was quite a bit. I don't know exactly, but
Okay.
I can't remember. But Canberra is the landlord, and they did this in every property they purchased. I believe that they purchased a number of properties at the same time, not on the basis of being satisfied with the profit from the units that were rent controlled, but on the basis of we can evict everybody and make a lot more money.
Right. And I mean, as we've discussed at this committee many times, a solution to this would be vacancy control, proper vacancy control, so that there was some provincial control on how much a rent could be raised between tenants. But because no such thing exists, there's a financial incentive to evict.
That would be excellent, yes. Vacancy control.
Right.
And the other issue is, I think, as Ms. Staples talked about, they can serve another N13 at any moment.
Mm.
So the tenants in our building are under a state of chronic fear.
Right.
Right. Without the anti-eviction bylaw, we are left in a state of, are they going to start up again?
Mm.
Now, they have no basis for the N13. It's scare tactics. It's threats.
Right. So do you believe if there was some regulation, like a bylaw from the city, that forced a landlord to prove that they required vacant possession before issuing that N13, do you think that would be helpful?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, they should have evidence that the work is necessary, right? That it requires vacancy, and that there should be a building permit that has to be produced. If that was the case, I don't think my landlord would have gone forward with all this eviction harassment.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here, and I think you help underscore the point I've been trying to tease out, which is that the data that staff received from the LTV is an indication of a trend, but it certainly does not capture the scope of the problem in our city. It tells us a piece of the story.
Yeah, because those are the ones that are filed.
Right.
But there are for everyone filed, how many are unfiled?
Right.
And
Okay.
tenants are afraid. And we should not have to live on this under this constant fear in order that landlords can circumvent rent control, which is all it is, really. There are very few actual valid rent evictions. I just like to say that that's my opinion. Extremely few. It would be extremely rare that a tenant would have to vacate. We had a prospective buyer for the building who came through and said, I've done major renovations, right? On buildings, and he was just talking about it because it's a heritage property, and it's always nice to preserve heritage. He was interested in that, and he said, I replaced all the wiring and all the walls, but he did not ask any tenants to move out, and actually tenants stayed during that process. Okay, so I mean, he was not interested in renoviction, he was interested in doing the work. I mean, my God, if the building is falling down, you really have to ask, if you need structural repairs. The question is, how did it get to that point? Why wasn't it caught earlier? If the place is so bad, and this is because landlords don't do repairs, why bother? You just, get rid of the tenant, do some stuff, and later, don't worry about it. We'll deal with it when we can get more rent.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your perspective. It's really helpful. Thank you for coming
Thank
today.
you, Ariel Truster. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Klempen. That is the last delegation on this item. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Luloff, question.
Thank you, Chair. So of the four delegations that we've heard today, and I realize that is just a snippet of the stories that are out there, especially given your work with Acorn, I'm sure that you've heard far more stories. Of the four that we heard today, three are tied to a particular landlord. How widespread do you think this issue is? Is there are a majority of landlords doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there are a few really bad actors? What's your impression from the conversations that you've been having? Because hearing Mr. Ambara's name 3 times today and a couple of times in my office over the course of the last 6 months or so leads me to believe that there are a few very bad actors, but that most landlords seem to be following the rules and not intimidating their tenants.
Yeah, I understand the point you're trying to make. Actually, I'm quite offended by the term bad actors because it implies that, in fact, there are only a few of these landlords doing this. Well, I think it's clear from the data that was in that report, right, of the Planning and Housing Committee, that the percentage increases are drastic. And we need a lot more explanation about why these drastic increases occur. These are actual filings that are showing the percentage increases. They don't even account for all the eviction notices that are simply served and then not filed. Okay, so no, I don't think it's just in Barra. I think there's a lot of this going on. A lot of people are terrified that this is what's going to happen to them, that their landlord is going to go, oh my God, you've been under rent control for a while, right? Let's just serve it in 13. Now, there are good landlords who would not do that, no doubt. I'm not saying they're all doing it, but I don't think this is a problem restricted to a few bad actors. A lot of landlords, my previous landlord was constantly violating LTB regulations. And so why not? Because nothing ever happens at LTB. There's no deterrence, there's no consequences. It's a little slap on the wrist and stop doing that. Repeatedly, stop harassing, stop harassing. I mean, you try telling them harassment is the primary management method for this building. It doesn't matter. Nothing gets done, nothing gets accomplished. My previous landlord didn't mind going to LTB every week because nothing ever happened. This is the problem. We can't count on RTA. We can't count on LTV. They don't function well, right? They're not up to scratch, and they're not protecting tenants. Now, in some cases, they're not protecting landlords as well. I understand that. There are failings on both sides.
I didn't mean to offend you. I don't want to call them good actors.
No, I'm not saying you offended me personally. I'm saying that term, which has been used before, implies that, somehow it's just a few landlords that are committing all of this. But I think there's much more of this going on, and I think you can see it in the data. Why were 50% of L2 applications withdrawn before a hearing? They were bogus. They
It's
got
being
the
used as
tenants out.
intimidation tactic. I understand.
Right, and none of my landlord's applications were in those, whatever it's at, 157. So, you know what I mean? We got to separate out uh, the problem with the actual filings and then the additional unknown problem, right, of all the serving just to scare tenants out of their units. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right,
No,
thank you.
thanks. I just wish that we had a bigger sample to deal with today, because when you hear 75% of the people coming out to talk today speaking about one landlord, it does cause pause.
Yeah, I imagine it would. The data is really missing here. If you look over the report from the Planning and Housing Committee, it's not answering fundamental questions, right? Like, who are these people? For example, your question, how many are by the same landlord, right? Why these percentage increases have occurred. I mean, I believe it's because access to more profit.
Well, thank you to you and everybody else who came out to speak today. We
Thank
appreciate it
you.
very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you very much to Ms. Klempen for that delegation. That was great. There are no further delegations. There's no action to be taken with this, but thank you very much to Councillor Troster for asking that it be held. Oh, do you want to ask questions to staff? Absolutely.
Hi, thank you so much to staff for responding to my inquiry and then responding again when the data was updated. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions drawing from some of the delegations here. We know that while the official pathway to file an N13 involves specific steps, we also know that tenants can feel pressured or intimidated to leave without ever receiving a formal eviction notice, as you heard today. When staff are working with tenants seeking emergency support, is there any data collected about tenants receiving informal notices of eviction or cash for keys? Do we have any way of quantifying how many people are being evicted into homelessness or being evicted or threat of eviction is requiring city support?
Thank you, Chair. The city does not directly, so we provide very limited funding for eviction loss prevention. Most of our referrals go to the Ottawa Community Legal Clinics. They would be probably best positioned to do that. We don't have direct oversight over those clinics, but we would be happy to reach up and follow up with you outside of this, Councillor.
Okay, I appreciate that. So again, we know what we're hearing anecdotally, and we know the pressure that's currently on our system, but we have no way of quantifying if a renoviction directly led into homelessness. Although we did hear from Peter Tilley at committee twice over the last 2 years about what he's seeing at the mission. But again, he didn't have numbers, so I know it's challenging.
Thank you, Chair. No, we don't have direct comprehensive numbers. As you've kind of said, we have a lot of anecdotal pieces of data. One of the things that will be coming forward to Council is the update on the renovictions bylaw, which we've done more in-depth data analysis. So we will have some more to share through that process, but that's not ready at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate